Welcome to the Focus on Why podcast. I'm Amy Rowlandson and I ask my guests one simple question. Why? Focusing on the importance of why, I share with you the relatable, uplifting and inspiring conversations I have with people from all walks of life. This podcast will encourage you to focus on your why to enable and empower you to achieve the success you desire. Have a purpose, have a plan, focus on why. Before we start, I would like to draw your attention to my weekly email newsletter, Friday Focus. Each Friday, I focus on one topic with one action arising. The link to sign up is in the show notes, or head over to amyrowlandson.com and sign up right now. Today on Focus on Why, I am joined by Jac McGill and Lorna Davies. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
And I feel like I'm seeing double, but you're going to have to explain that because nobody can see you.
No, that's fair. Yes, the reason you're seeing double is that Jac and I are identical twins.
Well, there we go.
So you don't need to ask the question, so how did you two meet?
Has anybody actually ever asked you that question?
Yes, many times. I always just say in the womb.
Yeah, it was an early networking session. You were on it. Well, welcome to Focus on Why. What is it that you are both focusing on?
Well, we have a big vision, a big mission ahead of us, and that is to change the landscape of mental health in children. And we want to reimagine it and think about their mental strength and have a very solutions-based approach towards that.
So just for the audience's ear, that's Jac's voice. Lorna, go.
Yes, that's right. So I've got a background in health. I work as an occupational therapist with children, and Jac is a primary school teacher. So we have dedicated our careers to supporting children and empowering them. But it was as we were discussing, cases together, sort of having a bit of a brainstorm to see what each of us could add to our classroom and our caseload. We were really interested in how some children overcame hurdles and were just more resilient and able, and other children could be quite stuck on what seemed like small, maybe obstacles to overcome. And we just got really curious about that. And the other sort of stream of that is that in my training as an occupational therapist, we never separate the body and the mind. You're always looking holistically. So we understand that when you have physical ill health, it does impact on your mental health, your motivation, your mood and things like that, and vice versa. And so we were noticing that when it came to mindset and children having anxiety or maybe not having the confidence or the self-esteem to overcome obstacles, that unlike physical conditions where I could easily give a parent a worksheet to follow some activities or giving them play these games, and the parent was very, very happy, if it sort of bordered into that kind of mental health arena, I just noticed parents and teachers just felt really, really unsure. And I think that's when you sort of research back about, mental health, and there's the stigma and it feels very specialist, and we just haven't integrated that into our everyday lives. And Jac and I were chatting about how that plays out in the school, so we get really clear messages to children early on about, eat 5 fruit and veg a day, have water bottle on your table, have the daily mile, keep active, keep moving, the cycle to school sort of campaigns. And so that felt really embedded and something that parents would be comfortable with, children are very comfortable with. But we were laughing when it came to health and wellbeing week. Everyone's still very much geared towards the physical skills, and nobody was doing it very much around that kind of mental health. So with a kind of proactive prevention, early intervention approach, it was about coming at it from from that perspective. And we have kind of coined that phrase like mental strength, because it's infinite. You would always want that. You know, if you said to your child, would you like your child to have parent, would you like your child to have mental strength? They would say yes. And would you like to help build that mental strength so that they can overcome anything, any challenges or barriers or obstacles that they'll face in life, because we know they will. And they would say yes. So what we found was, by reframing it in that way, we got a lot more buy-in and sort of reduced that stigma and that worry that you could get it wrong, or it was very, very special, and only special people could do it. So that is the sort of the big purpose, is to really shift that thinking around it, and empower parents and teachers and children to feel really able at any age to become wise for their size and build their mental strength.
And it's really interesting, this separation. Has there been a particular point in history where it happened, where it was joined before and then it's been separated? Or is it just a case of right now we see them as, or have seen them as separate?
I mean, I think that's a great question, Amy. I think the way medicine, so if you're thinking of a medical model, if you think the way the medicine developed, there was certainly a kind of like, there was a kind of branching out, wasn't there? So some people focused on the sort of physical ailments, and some people focused on the more kind of the mental ailments. And so it separated then, and a lot of other professions, other even allied health professionals that I work with, or even I'm thinking medics and nurses, you pick a specialism, and the specialism tends to be physical, and then they break that down into sometimes like body parts, you know, like orthopedics and cardiothoracic and things like that. Or you go for mental health, and again, that can be in varying degrees of severity. So I think what we're presented with is a very medical model that has, for the purposes of training, divided. And the beauty of the occupational therapy approach, which was all based out of occupation, so the doing and activity, which started in after the war, where they needed to rehabilitate soldiers, and they wanted to give them purpose and meaning, just very much like your topic. And so they discovered that when you gave the soldiers activities to do that again moved their limbs and got them engaged, their whole health improved. They were motivated. They started talking again. They could see that they had a purpose and they had meaning to their life. And so that's why we wouldn't separate it. But yeah, we're quite unique in that profession that way. So yeah, I think it's just been. Whereas if you look at kind of more social model, you wouldn't separate it.
And interestingly, when you say that, even in the curriculum in school, it's actually separated. There's mental health and wellbeing strands as opposed to like physical health. And that was my frustration when it came to health weeks and things like that, that the physical health was very much catered for, but the mental health strands weren't. And the mental health strands for experience and outcomes, they're exactly the same from early stages, early years, all the way up to 16-year-olds. It doesn't change. Neither does it for the physical health, but they need that broad experience throughout their lives to actually be whole, to be well in themselves. And I could easily see in the classroom environment that a child who cannot do something physically, it dents their confidence and their self-esteem across the board. So you can actually see that playing out, that actually if you acknowledge both at the same time, they make more progress.
I mean, it makes so much sense. And, you know, ultimately we're not just heads on sticks, you know, we are bodies, and we are a whole body. And now I actually can see how this sort of separation has occurred in terms of people becoming specialists in their areas. And then that then becomes quite niched, and you become really aware of what's going on, but to the detriment that you've then literally isolated all of the other factors. And one of my guests a long time ago, and it's just so rings in my ears all the time, is what the mind suppresses, the body expresses. And it literally is what you're saying here in terms of everything's connected. We're all connected. Every cell of us is. So we can't disregard one element and focus on something else, because it doesn't work like that. And yeah, it makes perfect sense. So this changing of landscape for mental and physical health combined, essentially the whole child. What or how will you know that you have achieved this mission and vision you've got?
Oh, I would imagine when I think of that we will just have a society that we're now, somebody might say, oh, I'm booking in my like gym appointment, or I'm going for that walk, or I'm doing this. Something similar would be said around maintaining your mental health. So it's like, I've booked out some time to talk with a friend today because I've got a few worries on my shoulders, or I'm taking time to journal this morning, or I'm taking some time to reflect on a situation that really upset me, or I'm going to connect deeply with my emotions, and we would all be completely accepting of it and applaud them. Like, yes, well done, that's exactly what you should be doing. And it wouldn't feel odd or woo-woo. Likewise, if somebody was having a time when their mental health was suffering, it felt like it had gone into a decline, that it would be perfectly acceptable that they would acknowledge that and reach out for support, just as you would for a physical injury, and they would get the help that they needed. And it would be not a specialist help, it would be from a society point of view, it would be accepted.
I'm just realizing, and it's actually quite emotional for me, because I have a practice called reflection with action. It's my episodes in between the guest episodes is reflection with action, because I see reflection as the opportunity to recognize the meaning that you assign to all the moments that you have and you experience. And then the purpose that you want to fulfill is taken through the action. Now, I didn't necessarily, I mean, I know that one is about thinking and reflecting and understanding me, but the action is obviously the physical side. So I have essentially combined that mental with the physical. I'm going to say it's accidental. Obviously, it's just me being a whole person and not even thinking about those were the elements that were needed. But it's exactly that. It's, as you say, to be proud of, taking the opportunity to think, to reflect, to understand what's going on, and be more connected to yourself.
And I think in addition to that, for me, it would be that the next generation, if you like, actually know how to support themselves, and can have that self-awareness. They have tools and strategies. And I think what is absolutely lovely is, with working with children, is that when a child feels empowered, they absolutely go and help a friend. You know, one of the activities we talk about is in our practice part of our methodology is, you know, how could you kind of pay this forward, or who could you tell about these skills that you've learned that might help them? And they always come up with, you know, across the generations, you know, I'm going to tell my mum all about this. I'm definitely going to tell my gran, or my very best friend. And so what we believe is that when we can empower the next generation, then they will almost empower the next generation. And so actually there'll be this lovely sharing. And as Jack said, they will praise each other. They will actually have strategies and tools, and they'll be helping each other. And that just makes the world a nicer place when we have empathy for and kindness for others, and kindness for ourselves, and that we can build each other up instead of, you know, competing and being mean. So I don't know how we would measure that, but that's what my feeling is.
Yeah, the world's a kinder, more empathetic place. Sounds perfect. And in terms of the ripples of that, I mean, it isn't just going to be going down and into the generations. As you say, it's going to affect parents, grandparents, all of the other people that they're around, because they'll be, I love this reverse mentoring. You know, it's like, hey, I've got this great tool and strategy that works. And Have you had any resistance from any parents?
Oh, yes. So I would say a very tentative phone call, probably a message to then have a phone call. And usually it's an exploration and there's a measure. So it's like, I don't think they're bad enough yet. So that's definitely the kind of resistance. I don't know if it's bad enough. So it's again ensuring that from a coaching point of view, it isn't just about it's got bad and I want it to get a bit better. It could actually be we're actually doing great. We're just going to be more able. We're going to have more confidence. We're going to love ourselves even more. We're going to have more confidence in our uniqueness and in our strengths. We're going to take opportunities and we're going to grow. So I think we knew there would be resistance because you have to take people on the journey with you. And that's actually why we came up with the storybooks as our first step to into our program, because storybooks are something that people are very familiar with. Reading to children is well established as a good activity to do for your child, with your child. And actually, most people, when you say, well, would you mind, would you feel comfortable if the first step was we just read the story together and we take it from there? And with our coaching stories, there's always something that, well, we'll pick the story that resonates best with the situation. And then they see their child saying, oh, like having so many, we actually do a reflective piece as well. So many reflections. The parent then has reflections. And so we've brought them in. So we've reduced the stigma. It's not about that anymore. And it's actually just about the possibility and potential of this coaching interaction. So I would say there's more anxiety around, has my child's almost mental health deteriorated enough that I need to get help? Whereas this is the conversation we need to switch. Because you wouldn't limit your child if they had managed to do a big bike ride or climbed a hill. You wouldn't say, oh well, that's just enough now. We'll just pare back that physical activity and we'll wait. Or you would keep them going. You would say, like, what's our next challenge? What else could we do? But for mental health, it's always like, I'm going to wait till it gets too bad or bad enough, and then I'll seek help. And that's the conversation we need to.
And I can see a change. We've been doing this nearly 5 years now for Wise My Size, and you can really see a change from at the beginning. Parents would come and seek support. Their child would have the coaching as well as their family, because we have the parents involved as well. And then they'd be so grateful, but they wouldn't want anyone to know. It's almost like, I was very glad that happened, but we'll just keep it super secret. But now, those people they are, giving us reviews on Google. They want to tell their friends. They're referring us. So I do feel that we are slowly chipping away at that. And I think the more in the media that's talked about mental health, the stigma is going. And I think parents are getting more glued into our methodology, that actually it's more a preventative measure than waiting till something goes bad. I know in the classroom environment, I might have parents come at the first parents' evening and say, I'm very worried about this, but we'll just keep an eye on them. And while you're keeping an eye on that child, something else can happen to another child in the class that you weren't particularly paying attention to, because bumps in the road happen all the time. They're not predictable, and we don't know what's going to happen. So for our way of thinking is, if every child understood themselves better and how they think, how their brains work, how we're predisposed to look for the worst case scenario in every single situation, that we have those kind of shade thoughts, we look for the negative. That's how we've survived this long, and just accept that in ourselves, and then kind of build ourselves back up. Say, oh, it's not the truth. It is a belief I might hold, or something I'm just telling myself to keep myself maybe safe from making a fool of myself, or I don't think I'm very able at this, so I'll just keep safe in my comfort zone at the moment. But once we understand that about ourselves, then we can actually grow and develop, and that's becoming much more commonplace, much more acceptable, and that's something we're really proud to keep promoting.
And it's really interesting, Jac, because what you're just sharing there about understanding more about how you think and how our brains work, I'm going to speak from the perspective that I can, which is my own, in terms of an adult who has been very late in my time. I would say I'm almost 50, just being diagnosed with ADHD. I didn't know that the way that I had been thinking and working and operating wasn't how other people were. And this is really interesting from the perspective of a child won't know, an adult doesn't know. It's you don't know what's going on, and so that awareness is key for all of us. You know, at the core of a lot of the work I do from a coaching perspective, self-esteem and low self-worth and the voices that we are hearing and what's going on in terms of inner selves and who's dominating that drive inside. It's constant, and even more so for a neurodivergent person like me. I didn't realize. I was like, oh, I can actually quiet this down and I can get some help with focus. Okay, yes, I'm all for that. So yeah, it's so key to understand what potential and possibility there is out there.
Absolutely. And it's just imagining, you know, if you'd been given that information and unlocked that awareness earlier, um, what difference it would make. And many of the parents, in fact, I would say all of the parents that we work with our children, will recognise in themselves. They will reflect, and they will get a lot out of being with a child as they're coached, and that helps sort of strengthen that relationship. They usually, I like what you said, that kind of reverse mentoring. But you know, a lot of parents come back and say, "Oh, you know, they make me do, you know, this week because if they're coming out their comfort zone, I have to too." And so they're really championing each other, and it really builds that. What the feedback we get is it really builds that relationship, the awareness, the language, the shared language and understanding. But it also just gives that child that potential to, you know, not sit with those beliefs, the sort of, we call them holding back beliefs, or that very noisy voice that's critical. And so then that just opens up a lot of opportunities that we know as adults, when you've got that holding you back, and it can hold you back for a long time, can't it, until you discover it. So if we can get the discovery part earlier, then the children are not going to be held back in that way.
Absolutely. I mean, my diagnosis was only came about because my son was diagnosed, and they were like, "Well, it's hereditary." So, and my husband was looking, "It's not me." So, you know, and then, but relationships are better. So, all the years of where we were expecting my son to do various things, and then you realize, well, he's not actually able to do that as well as you think he can. And the whole shift in dynamic, and as you were saying, the going out of your comfort zone is one thing, but understanding capabilities and making allowances in some respects, and that whole home relationship is shifting because of what you're doing in a school environment as well.
Absolutely.
And I think it's also really nice for children to understand that they don't have to do everything. They're allowed to say, "No, thank you, that I don't enjoy that. I don't like that. It's really not for me." But they can say that with authority and not be swayed when maybe peers or other adults say, "Oh, come on, I think this would be good for you." But they actually come from a place of power. They actually understand themselves better, and they actually understand. We do quite a bit of work on like their sensory profile and how they take in the world around them through their senses, and how that can feel very overwhelming for some children, especially if they're neurodiverse, and make a plan for what they want to. So one of our pillars is self-advocacy, so they can actually speak up for what they need in the moment, ask for things to be changed to support them so that they can be their best selves. And that in itself is very empowering, but also supports parents who maybe were that child at school, being overwhelmed, not coping, or being like that swan where it seems very calm on the surface and underneath they're just pedaling fast to keep up with whatever's going on around them. And for them to actually understand that they were never the problem. Their child's not the problem. And we can actually change the environment so that everyone can fit in and learn and thrive is actually really liberating. It's exciting because then you open up possibilities of what can this child do to reach their full potential.
Yes, it's a very strengths-based approach. So really focusing in and allowing that child to understand, what feels good. We all say what feels too much, what feels too little, what feels just right. But we also look at any energy management as well. That some activities they have to do activity, so you have to do them. Life is like that. But there's also then times where you can retreat or you can top up your energy in the ways that bring you joy. And that's, a really good coping strategy that it's really good to learn early on. Jac says giving them that kind of self-efficacy of empowerment and confidence in who they are is really, really important.
It is so important. What I'm hearing here is this ability to give someone autonomy, to know themselves better, to know what they feel. From my experience, I again, neurodiverse, I know that I can't always articulate emotions that well. Giving independence to a child is an absolute gift, because what I'm hearing is if you're doing that now, they're then able to make decisions, they're then able to face and be able to build resilience into facing obstacles later when things are much bigger, magnified. I mean, I know it always feels when you're little that it is scary, but things do get worse as you get older. But to have that ability to then be able to reach out for help as well, not have to take it all on board, but to know that they've got someone.
Absolutely. So it's teaching skills about that self-awareness, like what's happening for me, what do I need, what we do on like what needs to start, what needs to stop, what help do you need, who could you ask. So just having that modeled for them and tricky concepts just broken down into a way that a child can really relate to, they understand it, and then they can execute that when they need to. So important.
Give me an example, if you can, of where that's happened, that self-awareness has happened. And obviously you can't name names, but in terms of an environment where that's they've asked for help, or they've stopped something, or they've started something.
I can think of one child that I'm actually working with. Their concern, their big worry was about roller coasters. They were about to go back to a theme park that they'd been before, and they were already beginning to build up in their mind what they wouldn't do. So many of those things it was the environment. Their senses were overwhelmed. Some of it was just imagining their worst case scenario. A lot of it, the rides breaking down and being stuck at the top. And so we actually drained all their what if thoughts. So that's where we drain it, and they kind of work it as a physical scale. So like having the sides of their body being tipped in one direction. And we drained all the negative what if thoughts, all the things their clever brain was imagining might happen. It never happened, but it was imagining that it could. And only then, once we drained all that, could she then think of some positives. Like what if I enjoyed it? What if? And we made a plan. So she had a few things that she wanted to stop and start doing. And she had some help from her parents. And we also practiced saying, no, thank you, I don't want to do that. So that it meant that when she was given a choice, and she was completely in control of which ride she would go on, and she had her long weekend away, and when we met back up, she was really proud of herself. There was a few rides that she challenged herself. She listened to both sides, and she thought, no, my positive what if thoughts are pushing me forward. I really want to give this a go. But there was one ride, and she just said, no, thank you. That's not for me. And that was the end of the conversation. So actually for her, knowing that she was now in control, age 8, age 9, was actually really powerful. And she really enjoyed her trip, whereas she'd been not enjoying it beforehand. The thought of it was terrifying. So that's really important. So now she's also applied that to situations in the school, in the playground, if there's behaviour she's not enjoying from friends, or if she knows she can ask for something different. It's changed her, changed her outlook.
And that peer pressure, to have that ability to say no at 8, to then take that into your teenage years and beyond, to have the confidence to say no. I mean, that is such a powerful life skill. And I want to ask how that links in with fear, because what you're describing, I'm hearing, is obviously there were fears, there are fear-based thoughts that she was having. How does it work for building and escalating and developing your fear from that?
Well, we kind of talk about fear. We actually call it false evidence appearing real in Wise My Size World. And that's just explaining to the child that your subconscious mind, its number one job is just to keep you safe. And so it will look out for anything that's a potential threat, a potential danger. And we also talk about most things when you actually dream the what if thoughts, it very often just ends in death and destruction, which can be quite alarming for parents to hear. But it's almost like that's where they need to go, because that's ultimately where our subconscious would take us. But we also talk about like a social death, where in our ancestors, if you were outcast from the tribe and you weren't accepted, then you probably would not have survived. So actually that kind of wanting to be accepted and not be judged by others is really strong. So there's that element of it. So we talk about why we experience worry and fear in our bodies in the first place. We explore it and how it actually, we can like body map that out, the emotions that go with it, the thoughts that we're having. We explain to them what fight, flight, freeze is, why when we're in that response, we're probably not remembering our times table facts. So that when they're doing a test, that's why your brain just went blank there, you just can't remember it. And we just explore that it's just their clever brain trying to think of all the possibilities, all the scenarios, so that they can almost like get ahead of it. Or it looks so scary that they wouldn't even try in the first place. And actually, once they understand that none of this is real, it's not happened yet, it's just our clever imagination getting ahead of ourselves, then they can actually start breaking it down. And that's what we're saying, like we give them tools to like break down into like the next doable step, like what is possible. Do we need to start having conversations with people like beforehand, so like we preempt it, or do we need to stop listening to friends if they're being unhelpful, or stop listening to that little negative voice in our head before it gets too loud, or tell someone? Do we need to say, my worry is coming back, it's getting really loud? Another tool that we do is actually to draw and name their worry, and then we actually interview it. So I would be the interviewer and they would answer, and because they're the only one that can hear their worry's voice, they would answer. So it's really their subconscious bringing up the concerns. And quite often we interview it to find out why it's turned up, how long it's been here for, what does it want us to know, and actually they kind of like befriend that worry to the point where they can shrink it and then move beyond it. So that's a really powerful tool as well, so that they know that the worry is not there to get them to be unkind to them. It's actually, it has a purpose, and as long as we understand what the purpose is, then we can work with it rather than against it.
And talking of purpose, I know that a loose connection there.
Loose connection.
I hear your vision. I hear the mission. I hear all of this. What is the why behind this for each of you? Is it the same?
There's a lot of shared values that we have, and a big why. I suppose for me, it's that opportunity and that privilege to be able to empower young people and to just give them that independence and the skills and tools to live that life, that empowered life, that life without limits, and make this world kind of a better place, if you like. And I think now that we are able to share our methodology with others. There is that lovely, you know, purpose in just sharing the richness of those tools with others, and seeing them being able to again take their own, you know, toolkit, their experience, and use these tools and work with more children. So it's just building that momentum and just seeing that kind of play out, which is lovely. And just, you know, never stop learning, never stop being curious. Every single child you work with, every parent you work with, they teach you something else. And so it just motivates you to keep going.
And I think my why is very, very similar. As Lorna says, we've got a lot of overlap, but I think for me, I actually want to be the adult and support other adults to be the adult that I never had as a child. And I think to be a child's champion is a real privilege. Not very many people get to do it, and we get to do it every day, which is very exciting.
Oh, I just got the goosebumps. and it happens when it taps into that moment of when you recognize that somebody is filling the void that they had for themselves. You know, it is that taking themselves back into that moment. And it is so powerful to have that connection, to do that. And for, you know, different reasons that has come together, and it really is, it's beautiful work. And I really, I can't see any other landscape than this one. You know, it really is a beautiful one. So thank you. Thank you very much. It's great to hear your purpose, your why, what you're doing, and how you are integrating the whole of all of these fabulous young children who are going to be teaching us wisely in the future. Lots of things. It's really lovely. How could people get in touch with you? I mean, I guess you're up in Scotland, but what else could they do if they're not in Scotland?
Well, we have, you are correct, Amy, we are in Scotland. The voice always gives it. So they can connect to us via our website. So that's www.wisemysize.com. And we're also on LinkedIn. And if anyone was interested or curious about children's coaching, we are always open for a conversation and to talk about our children's coach cert as well.
Oh, amazing. That sounds fantastic. So all of those details are in the show notes, and it really is great. And I'm just thinking, I'm sure this is one of those episodes where you could have it in the car and the children in the back might say, you know what, that sounds like a really good idea. You know, it's just one of those, play it now. It sounds good.
Let's hope so.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you for coming on, both of you. And thank you also to our mutual friend, Kerry Wilson, for recommending you both. It's been an absolute joy having you on the show. Do you have some final words? And you can both have some final words each, please.
And I think my final words will be my favourite of phrases, that practice makes progress. So if you're ever feeling unsure about anything, keep practicing and you're always going to make a little bit of progress. You're going to be better than you were yesterday.
Jackie does love a practice makes progress.
I do.
Yes, it's one of our favourites. Gosh, my final words. I would just say to everyone listening, you know, think of yourself and think of your child as that holistic person, and don't be scared of someone who's, or of your child's having worry or going through a tricky time, and that you feel that you can't help them, because you can. There is help out there, and every single child we work with, we've seen transformation for them and their family and parents. So don't feel disheartened, don't be scared of it, yeah, hopefully this chat will have helped you feel a bit more able, a bit more empowered to do something about it.
How has this conversation had an impact on you? What value have you received from tuning in? What are your reflections with actions? Please take a moment to leave me an Apple Podcast or Spotify review sharing how Focus on Why has made a difference to you today. Remember, the conversation doesn't end here. To keep it going, simply connect with me on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook or Twitter, or join the Focus on Why Facebook group. All the links are in the show notes. Have a purpose, have a plan, focus on why.